Hello, I am Lakshman Maaheshwary, and today I am going to tell you about euthanasia. So, what is euthanasia? It is derived from the Greek word meaning good death. It is intentionally killing of a person whose life is considered not to be worth living. It is a practice of intentionally ending a life to relieve pain and suffering. It is a gentle, easy, and painless death, and hence nicknamed the mercy killing. The purpose is so that in the last days, a patient can peacefully end life. The concept of euthanasia is all about deliberately ending sufferings to bring relief to the patient and the family. Euthanasia and assisted suicide are often used interchangeably. However, there are a number of differences between the two concepts. In assisted suicide, the action is taken by one's own self, whereas in euthanasia, the actions are taken by other person. In assisted suicide, the patient has full control, which is not there in euthanasia. Lastly, in the assisted suicide, the patient is the primary agent in committing suicide, whereas in euthanasia, a third party is generally the primary agent in committing suicide. Euthanasia can be classified in two manners based on the consent and participation of the third party. Based on the consent, it can be voluntary, non-voluntary, or involuntary. Based on the participation of the third party, it can be either passive or active. In voluntary euthanasia, the person who is being killed has requested to be killed. It is conducted with the consent of the patient. The patient may be asking for help with dying, refusing burdensome medical treatment, asking for life support machines to be switched off, or is refusing to eat, or has simply decided to die. In non-voluntary euthanasia, the person who is killed made no request and gave no consent. The person might be unable to communicate the wishes, or the consent of the patient is unavailable. It includes the cases like child euthanasia, or when the person is in a coma, or when the person is mentally retarded to a very severe extent, or when the person is severely brain damaged. In involuntary euthanasia, the person who is killed made an express wish to the contrary. It is conducted against the will of the patient. This is usually murder but might not always be the case. It may be required for greater good. The morality of such cases are upon the individual to decide. Active euthanasia is also known as aggressive euthanasia. It is causing intentional, quicker death of a human being by direct intervention. All forms of active euthanasia are illegal and are not allowed in India and in most parts of the world. Active euthanasia has raised moral questions and ignited debates worldwide. Passive euthanasia is also known as non-aggressive euthanasia. It is intentionally causing death by not providing essential, necessary, or even ordinary care of food and water essential for the continuance of life. It is usually slower and more uncomfortable than active euthanasia. It is also a part of many religious and social practices and has been allowed in India. Now let us talk about the global scenario of euthanasia. Let us talk about Netherlands first. In April 2002, Netherlands became the first country to legalize euthanasia and assisted suicide. However, it has imposed a strict set of conditions. The patient must be suffering unbearable pain, the illness must be incurable, and the demand must be made in full consciousness by the patient. Let us now talk about Belgium. It passed a law in 2002 legalizing euthanasia and hence became the second country in the world to do so. The patient can receive euthanasia when they freely express a wish to die because they are suffering unbearable pain, or if they have clearly stated it before entering a coma or similar vegetative state. In Switzerland, assisted suicide is legitimized, but euthanasia is not done directly by patient's doctor. The patient himself commits suicide at special clinics. The doctor prescribes a poison which causes death, but the patient himself has to drink the poison. Switzerland has also become the suicide tourism capital. Foreigners can come to Switzerland and commit assisted suicide. In England, a person has a right to refuse life sustaining treatment as part of their right to autonomy and self determination. Now, let us talk about some cases in India. The first and the most important case in India regarding euthanasia is ARUNA SHANBAUG case. ARUNA SHANBAUG worked as a nurse in King Edward Memorial Hospital. In 1973, she was sexually assaulted, deprived of oxygen, and left to die. She was choked with a dog chain and sodomized. This left her in a coma. On behalf of Aruna, her friend Pinky Virani filed a petition. She argued the continued existence of Aruna is in violation of her right to live in dignity. She was kept alive by feeding tubes. The court rejected her plea in March 2011. She died from pneumonia on 18th May 2015 after being in coma for a period of 42 years. Another recent issue is ANAMIKA MISHRA case. A woman from Kanpur wrote to Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeking euthanasia for her daughter ANAMIKA MISHRA. ANAMIKA is suffering from muscular dystrophy disease and her father died because of the same disease. They are in poor financial condition too. The Prime Minister responded and told officers to look into the matter. Another case in news was Mr. Narayan and Mrs. IRAVATI LAVATE case. They are an elderly couple from Thakurdwara, Mumbai. They wrote a letter to the Office of the President of India requesting permission for active euthanasia. They don't have any medical problems but have fear of being terminally ill and not doing anything for the society. Hence, they decided to seek permission for mercy killing. Now let us examine the current law on euthanasia in India. In March 2018, the Supreme Court of India legalized passive euthanasia, that is through withdrawal of life support to patient in a permanent vegetative state. This decision was taken by a 5-judge bench headed by the then Chief Justice of India, Deepak Mishra, and it was based largely on ARUNA SHANBAUG case. However, the patients must consent through a living will and must be either terminally ill or in a vegetative state. Active euthanasia, including the administration of lethal compounds for the purpose of ending life, is still illegal. So, what is the right choice? Now, first, let us have a look at few arguments against euthanasia. The first and foremost argument made is that the life is not ours to take. The human life is a gift of God, and taking life is wrong and immoral. Human beings cannot be given the right to play God. Also, miracles do happen. There are examples of patients coming out of coma after years. There can be breakthrough in medical sciences, and hence some uncurable disease can now be cured. Lastly, it is against the medical ethics, morals, and public policy. Medical ethics calls for nursing, caregiving, and healing, and not killing. The next argument is that it can lead to loss of trust. The doctor-patient relationship is based on mutual trust. Patients will not be able to trust either doctors or their relatives if euthanasia is made legal. Talks about patients' painless, dignified death may become a euphemism for assisted murder. Making euthanasia legal is a slippery slope. The vulnerable people will be at a greater risk. It can lead to organ farming or forced organ donations. There will be a rush to end life, and sinister motives might come into play. Lastly, the debate remains, is euthanasia really different from suicide? When suicide is not allowed, then euthanasia should also not be allowed. A person commits suicide when he goes into a state of depression and has no hope for life. In that case, isn't euthanasia and suicide essentially the same? We will now examine some arguments to legalize euthanasia. A famous quote says, "The success or failure of euthanasia movement is based on the classification of feeding tubes as a medical treatment." The most important argument in favor of euthanasia is dignity in death. The argument is that euthanasia assures a dignified and peaceful life to all, and euthanasia provides a way to relieve the intolerably extreme pain and suffering. It relieves the terminally ill from a lingering sense of death and maintains the quality of life by providing a dignified death. Further, it expresses the choice of a person, which is a fundamental right. It also ends the agony of family and the loved ones. There is also an argument of the greater good. In many developing and underdeveloped countries like India, there is lack of funds. There is a shortage of hospital space and doctors. Hence, it only makes sense to save those lives which can be saved instead of continuing the life of those who want to die. Here's another quote which says, "Remember me as who I was in life, not what I have now become in death." A very emotional argument in favor of euthanasia is by people who want to be remembered in a certain way. They do not want their life to be dragged in a manner which is indignified and which does not reflect the life that they have led, and hence they want to go out on their own terms. This video was about euthanasia and the arguments in favor and against it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.